There's been a lot of discussion about autism being funded by the NDIS, and this is being discussed as one area that could be cut back, and this came into the debate about how to fund the AUKUS submarines. In your view, Mr Shorten, is autism being overdiagnosed or misdiagnosed here?
Well, one question is the diagnosis, and the other question is, once you have a diagnosis, what do you do with it? I think we're getting better at identifying.
Do you think it is being overdiagnosed?
Well, I think what's happening is that for little kids who might have a learning delay, some things are getting badged as autism in order to get them on the path of the NDIS because we don't have other supports in the broader community. But I also think that the scheme is not for every person with a diagnosis of autism. Autism, there's various levels of it and affects people and impacts their individual circumstances differently. I think if we build better early childhood screening and detection, I think if we make sure also that when people are getting treatment for and support for autism, that we're using evidence-based treatments, not just everything goes. So that's an area which we've set up a review and they're consulting with a lot of people. All of this is, to some extent, I'm ahead of, you've got me sort of at quarter time, half time in the process of reform.
Yes, I understand that.
And there's still some more work to be done.
Yeah. Look, you just mentioned there the different levels of autism. As I understand it, level 1 autism doesn't actually get any funding, so barely anyone is being diagnosed with level 1 autism and everyone's being diagnosed with level 2 or 3 because that's where the funding is. Is that what you're seeing?
I think there is an issue. I don't have the specific numbers to hand, but there is an issue that the diagnosis is following the money, so to speak. And I'm not blaming anyone, but we've got to tackle it. I think I'm interested in the best science and the best expertise. The Telethon Institute in Western Australia, the Olga Tennyson Centre at La Trobe University in Victoria, Griffith University, there are plenty of world-leading researchers, but they agree broadly on the following proposition. The earlier you diagnose a child with a developmental or a learning delay, the better you're going to be to help them adjust. And not every pathway should end up in the NDIS. The scheme was never designed for everyone with a disability in Australia, but we've got to have alternative supports for people.
And you were obviously the architect of this scheme. You were there designing it. This is your baby. Did you argue when this scheme started that psychosocial disabilities shouldn't be part of the NDIS?
No. The basis of the scheme is if you have Australia's a lucky country and we want everyone to share an opportunity. The opportunity to have a fulfilling life shouldn't be dictated by the level of your impairment. So we wanted a scheme which would provide individual packages of support for people who were most profoundly impaired. There are some psychosocial conditions which profoundly impair you. And so I look at the individual and their circumstances, but what I also think is that we have to be careful of just saying you have a diagnosis, therefore you're on the scheme. You've got to look at how it affects individuals. But part of the challenge also is, and participants tell me and families tell me, they sometimes feel that they get reports, but the people making the decisions don't read them. They talk to me that when the scheme's not working well, it just becomes a sort of maze where you're constantly trying to hang on to what you've got. So I really fundamentally believe, and people in Australia, I really fundamentally believe that if we get the participant experience right at the outset, and you get that right, then I think a lot of the other sort of negative features, which sometimes people talk about, start to get eliminated. See, a lot of participants tell me that sometimes they feel like ATMs for service providers. Now, there's a lot of great service providers, just as like there's a lot of great people in the disability agency. But what we need to do is make sure that it's a much more human, empathetic, less, remote, impersonal experience. And that comes from helping invest in the people who are working in the scheme and giving them the skills and specialisation. A lot of people with disability complain to me that they constantly feel they have to reprove their disability annually. We've got to get rid of that rubbish.